Alright folks, today I'm going to present to you another case of dark environmental storytelling in the Walking Dead universe. It's been a bit since I've done one of these videos, so if you're unfamiliar with this series, environmental storytelling is something that's been in the Walking Dead since its inception. A technique where a series of objects or bodies will be laid out in a way that conveys a story to the viewer without explicitly stating what that story is. Today's video is all about the mysterious scene left behind at the Chilton High School Carnival, featured in The Walking Dead Season 7, Episode 12, which, in all honesty, is one of the most bizarre scenes to piece together in this franchise. I'm going to structure this video by taking you through the evidence as it was first presented to us, before going back and attempting to put together a story out of the pieces given. If you're enjoying this type of content, be sure to hit that like button and drop a sub to see more videos like this. Following Negan's lineup, our survivors were forced to scavenge and provide food and supplies for the saviors as they lived under their rule. But in time, the communities would reach their limits and begin to secretly rally the troops, hoping to fight back against their oppressors. But they had a slight issue. The saviors had basically fully disarmed the communities, and without guns, an army would be useless. So Rick and Michonne would plan a run together to see what they could find to help with their cause, discovering a carnival that was hosted by Chilton High School before the world fell. But approaching the chain link fence, the couple would find this place had been occupied since then. You see, when the dead began to walk, the military was deployed across the country to set up safe zones in dedicated areas, and it appears Chilton High School was a part of that list, as a walker dressed in full combat gear with a rifle over its shoulder approaches, having died from what appears to be a gunshot wound to the chest. Taking it out, Rick would discover empty shell casings lying on the ground. It appears some sort of firefight happened here, but if it was against the dead, who would have shot the soldier? And even more curious, the gun was over his shoulder. Why didn't he fight back? Michonne would acknowledge something serious happened here, but all Rick cares about are the serious guns they might be storing. Climbing onto a vantage point, the duo would discover the whole place was crawling with the dead, many decked out in military uniforms much like the walker at the fence, but also among them, civilians dressed in your average clothing. But judging by the surplus of rifles around the walkers, this was definitely the kind of place they were searching for, as it appeared unlooted. But while fooling around shooting carnival targets, the couple would fall through the waterlogged roof, breaking their fall on the camp's supply of emergency food rations. How lucky. But this discovery tells us whoever attacked this camp may have failed in their mission, as most of the supplies lie untouched. Most of these civilians appear unarmed, so whatever happened here may have been from within. But the next morning, Rick and Michonne devise a plan to clear out all the walkers, where we get a closer look at the gruesome scene that lies before them. As mentioned, not all, but many soldiers remained armed with fully loaded guns, as if whatever happened came suddenly and unexpectedly. Long decayed bodies of soldiers who had been shot in the head lie in the grass, but these ones had guns in their hands, meaning at least some had fought back against the attack despite being caught by surprise. It's possible there may have been armed civilians among the decayed bodies, but from watching which ones they picked the guns up from, I couldn't see any evidence of that. A car lies riddled with bullet holes, with a walker soldier stuck through the windshield head first. To me, this indicates the military had tried to stop somebody from attempting to leave, but we don't see the driver inside. At first, I thought the soldiers were the only ones with bullet wounds, but taking a closer look, I don't think that's the case. It might just be a bit harder to see with them having darker clothes. I don't know. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. But something that isn't as easily explainable, Rick spots a group of civilian walkers with their hands bound heading his way. This is a detail that really threw a wrench in a lot of the theories I had. After a near-death scare with Rick narrowly avoiding the horde, the two would clear the rest of the walkers and embrace each other. collecting the weapons from the bodies they desperately needed to fight back against the saviors. Alright, anybody else confused? Because I am. A lot of the theories I come up with as to what happened here seems to have evidence going against it. But let's take a look at what we can probably determine to be more than likely true. Again, this is a very bizarre scene to try to piece together. Chilton High School was turned into a military safe zone housing civilians. More than likely exactly what we see in Fear Season 1. Some sort of battle broke out between two human factions, judging by the bullet wounds on the soldiers and surrounding structures. However, looking at the rifles still loaded around the walkers, the initial attack was by surprise. At some point, for whatever reason, civilians were held captive there. And finally, whoever was responsible either did it for reasons outside of wanting supplies and weapons, or died trying to reach it, as most of it lies untouched. Everything else we see is questionable. Could this have been the work of an outside group? Well, I doubt it. Again, considering most of the supplies and weapons were untouched, and we don't see any of the civilian walkers with weapons. At least from what I could tell. That's not the MO of the Saviors or the Garbage People, and if it was a group like the Wolves, we would see W's in the foreheads or mutilated bodies, not gunshot wounds. It just wouldn't make sense for any of these groups to kill them all and not take the supplies. Could it have simply been an attack from a wandering horde of walkers? Well, we don't really see any major damage to the perimeter fence, so I doubt that too. I know The Walking Dead likes to make the military look weak when it comes to walkers, but I refuse to believe the entire camp would be overrun without the soldiers even holding their guns. Not to mention, I don't see any bites on any of them, mostly just gunshot wounds from what I can tell. So, in my opinion, the likelihood of this simply being an attack from a horde is low. So, what are we left with? Well, I think I have a theory that could make sense, but since no cast or crew member has commented on this scene from what I can tell, we are really just left to guess. Again, there are probably a bunch of things that will go against my theory, and it's entirely possible I missed or misinterpreted a detail or two. But this is where you guys come in. Now that you have seen the evidence, let me know your interpretation of the story in the comments down below. As we know, when the dead began to walk, the military were deployed to set up safe zones for civilians in major metropolitan areas. But it appears they were set up in more urban areas as well, which we've actually seen before in Season 2 with Shane and Otis's run to the school. Chilton High School, of course, was chosen as it had many areas for storage and housing, and a fenced-in area large enough to host an entire carnival that could easily be defendable with its fences and high vantage points. As we know, on September 10th, 2010, orders were given for the military located in the big cities to abandon these safe zones, as the Air Force was preparing to drop napalm on every metropolitan area in the country in an attempt to contain the dead. But from what we can tell, these orders were not given to those outside the cities, as no imminent danger was coming to them, leaving the safe zones to be governed by the remaining soldiers as there were no more orders coming. We've seen on many occasions the military portrayed as rather cruel and remorseless to the public, but we've also seen examples of the opposite with characters such as Okafor and Huck, who would defy their orders to protect the innocent. What I believe happened here was a rebellion from within gone wrong. So I propose a scenario where the Chilton High School safe zone continued to function for the coming weeks, with the civilians forced to follow the orders of the military personnel taking lead. As no directives continued, those in charge would grow paranoid, realizing they were now alone in this and had a limited amount of food rations for all these people. So as a response, they would restrict each civilian's food portion as a way to make it last while they figured things out. But like we've seen many times before in the Walking Dead universe, those making the rules would begin to power trip, choosing who got what food and supplies at an unfair level, which pretty much just boiled down to them hoarding it to themselves while giving the civilians scraps. But not all soldiers agreed with this way of leading the camp, sneaking some of the civilians food rations in secret when they could out of empathy so they wouldn't starve. But after getting caught with it, the civilians would be bound and held captive for stealing. This event would begin to rally more of the soldiers wanting to protect the people, as they were told those held captive were to be executed. So in their minds, the time had come to start a coup. But unfortunately, this would go horribly wrong, as although the soldiers rebelling would catch the others by surprise, taking a good amount of them out before they even noticed, the survivors would begin to fight back with everything they had. It's possible the objective was to take the pantry, or maybe it was just to get everyone out of there, but regardless, they would never make it, as bullets flew on all ends of the yard, hitting both sides alike. The bound civilians were more than likely executed, along with the others as they remained defenseless in a battlefield. Some would try to escape, even going as far as to hit a soldier with one of the cars as they fired, but it's more than likely they weren't successful in getting away. It was absolute chaos, but in the end, there would be no winner on either side. It's possible some civilians or soldiers could have escaped the conflict when it went down, but if they did, they certainly never returned. It's impossible to tell which body was on what side with all the uniforms appearing the same, but it's safe to assume the ones who still held their rifles over their shoulders were the first to go in the surprise attack. But in the end, it wouldn't matter who was in the right or wrong, as most of the civilians would all be killed anyway. The soldiers who fought for the people were noble in their cause, but unfortunately weren't successful, giving their lives to fight what they believed to be inequality. As I mentioned, this was one of the tougher stories to try to piece together. I'm sure there's something I missed or got wrong, but I tried my best to incorporate all the evidence we gathered in a way that would make sense, so I hope you guys enjoyed. But please let me know in the comments what you think happened here, and if you think my theory is accurate or not. But that's gonna do it for me today, folks. Thanks so much for watching.